Okay. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Job the Librarians. My name is Erica and I'm your adult librarian.
And I'm Lauren. I'm a reference librarian.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about Dreamfall, which is written by Amy Plum, and this story is about 17 who suffer from chronic insomnia, and it's so bad to the point where they agreed to have this experiment done. Well, I forgot where exactly they're based at or located at. They have a bunch of earthquakes, and it somehow messes up the flow of things, and it causes everything to kind of just go in a different direction where the teens are plunged into dreamlike states, and they're all within, they call it this void. It is basically is real. It's the point, if you die in that dream, you die in real life as well. So the kids and nightmares all come to life, and they all have to figure out and work together on how to get out of that void, or what, with a dreamlike state as well.
Essentially, it's a book version of The Matrix.
Basically, because it's referenced as the Matrix. There's a Matrix reference in the book, and so I gave it 2.5 stars. I did have my problems with it, and I did like some of it. I went into it kind of with high expectations because I actually read her Remnants Chronicles, which are my favorite. But I guess
So her
because
other books are better than this, I take it.
yeah. But keep in mind, I read it when I was like in my late teens, early 20s.
Okay, I asked because this is my first experience with her. So I came in with like no expectations. I hadn't done anything by her.
Yeah, I love those series, but this is nothing like that as far as the writing goes. This is a duology. The second one, I think it's called Neverfall. It came out this year, and I don't know if I'm going to read that one. If I do, it'll be because of how the first one ended, which was a really big plot twist at the ending. But like I said, the teens are all within this dreamlike state, and it's told from three point of views. Even though it's 17s, it's told from Kata. I can't say her name. Point of view, Fergus and Jamie. And Jamie is an intern, I believe, and his point of view are actually, in my opinion, the best parts of the story, because the teens is so repetitive, because they each live their nightmares, and the same thing goes over and over again. And who is this real? How did I get here? How did I get out? And it's the same thing with them. From Jamie's point of view, we get to have more in depth of who the teens are and their characters and the personalities and whatnot with that.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't finish this book, and you guys know that's kind of a rarity for me with this show. Regardless of how much I hate a book, I usually try to get through the whole thing so that way I can discuss it. The big reason for me on not finishing this book is it made me so mad. Um, and I've told my book club, like other book clubs that I'm in, that it's okay to not finish a book if you can back it up. And for me, what made me mad and in turn not finish it was basically the entire book felt like the kids were being institutionalized, like as they're being experimented on, to treat their various forms of essentially mental illness, insomnia, and whatnot. And the book is supposed to be fantasy horror. And what made me mad is this idea that people who are ill enough to be in an institution need to be scary, or that the illnesses are scary. And yes, there is a real life fear to these illnesses when you're going through them. But I couldn't get over this feeling of it was wildly inappropriate of the author to try to make this a fear factor type of thing. Um, and to make it worse, I read another book this month for um, I did a buddy read thing where we decided to read horror because it's, October and Halloween's coming up. And the book they suggested we read was A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay, where one of the characters is schizophrenic or has multiple personality or something. And rather than being terrified of the person, you sit there and you feel bad because they're going through this. And what's terrifying is while this person is dealing with schizophrenia, the rest of the family has no idea how to deal with that, on top of the fact that they also think that she's possessed, and so they're bringing in the church to fix her. So the terrifying bit is everything that's going on around her, not the mental illness. So I just thought the um, very different treatments of the mentally ill in these two horror books kind of showcase how it can be done well and how it can be done badly.
Right, and I can see that because one of the characters, Ant, got picked on by, I think his name was Remy. I finished this book like way in the beginning, which is different from me because everybody not wait till the last minute to read it. And so,
Erica will power read through everything and be on point.
so I'm trying to remember everything because I read so many other things after. But it's to the point where everybody is basically mentally shot, and so everyone has their attitudes and everything going on. And Aunt tells the time through her pulse or something like that. She's able to be able to tell the time and how long they've been in a certain dreamlike state or what nightmare they're in. And Remy, who is from Africa, basically tells her, "Will you stop doing it?" Because I think she has to tap things, and she works in sixes. And he basically made this comment about her being having ADHD or autism, one of those. And I felt like that part really wasn't necessary in this sense because you're making fun of it. And I don't believe he apologized as well for that. And she just kind of just backed it off as, I'm not that. I'm really smart. And it's a lot of those references within a book that I didn't like, which knocked off a bunch of stars for me. And I can see why you're saying that you feel like it was institutionalized because it seemed like they treated it like I felt like instead of like really trying to help them, they just found out what was the most convenient thing for them to get, so the parents don't have to deal with it. And at the beginning, one of the parents, well, the main character, what's her name? Kata. I can't think of her
I'm
name.
not really sure. Like, it was one of those things where it was a cool looking name, but I could not tell you how to pronounce it because, like you, in my head, I kept flip flopping between Kata and Kata.
Yeah, and so she referenced one parent looked like they were just there to get him off, um, so the parents don't have to deal with it. And I think it's extreme to where they have to be like test subjects, you know?
Yeah, and it wasn't like they were, trying to find a cure. They weren't donating themselves to science. They weren't um, research subjects. Like, I'm part of a research study after my car accident to see how brains work after traumatic brain injuries. These kids weren't doing this. This wasn't something they volunteered for. They didn't donate their bodies to science. They were sent there so their families didn't have to deal with the issue of them having whatever issue they had.
Right. And they all stem from different things, whether it be domestic or mental abuse, because Fergus, the dad, I think he was physically abusing him because in his dreamlike state, his dad was chasing him, trying to kill him. And Kata, she suffers from PTSD, and you only get glimpses of their past through Jamie because he's reading their files. And then one girl, she had a horrible accident with her sister. When her sister died, dang it, can't remember. She drowned. Did she drown? I think she
It
did.
was something like super traumatic like that though, where it was some. I read it like right at the beginning of the month, but it was super traumatic, and it was one of those things where nothing could be done. I mean, unless you had gone there at the perfect time type of situation. But it was like otherwise nothing would have been done, and it was super accidental, and yeah.
Yeah, it
You
was
know,
more.
kid falls downstairs. Well, unless the parent is right there next to the child before they fall, you
Yeah,
know, it's just tragic.
because it was to the point where her sister was cutting herself, and then the thing came up about being suicidal, which she said she wasn't. But like I said, each teen had a reason, or their insomnia stemmed from something. And so this book covers a lot of mental illness, or a lot of internal things that are going that the teens are battling constantly, which causes them to have that, and to the point where they feel like they need to do anything necessary to not feel those type of things.
Before we go further, I should probably say this isn't us saying that there's really anything necessarily wrong with the kids, or that we disagree with mental health or the discussion of mental health in books. You guys have been here for a while. You've seen us having the mental health conversations, tossing out the number for the suicide hotline, which again, if you need it, please use it. But the thing is, we aren't saying anything negative about that. I always think there needs to be an open dialogue in, in families, in books, in movies about this stuff, so that way there's not a stigma to it. Our problem is with how the author treated that stuff in this book.
Right, and like I say in my other videos, you can write about different things, but it's the way you write them. Things what you write about, it's okay, especially if you want to cover that topic, but you need to write it in a way to where it justifies what you're trying to write, because you can write something and it could come off in a different way, and it's like you have those exceptions to that. Okay, this was fine because even though I don't agree with this, even though this is wrong or needs to be brought awareness to it, it's okay in this sense because of the way it's written in the story and it's justifiable, but not saying you agree with it. That making sense with it, you know. And so that's what I got from the story as far as what the teens were all battling. You know.
I will say this, and to get us off our anger on just the treatment of this book, the diversity in this book was nice. Um, we end up reading, a lot of books like that Amish book at the beginning of the year where every character in that book was Amish. Like every character looks the same. Like we end up getting these books where every character looks the same on some way. You don't get except like this book and the Long Journey to the Small Angry Planet, where it was a mix of species. We basically pick a book and it's urban fiction, or it's Wild Beauty where everybody's Latina, or it's like I said, the book at the beginning of the year where it's Amish fiction and everybody's white and Amish. And to have a group that clearly was mixed gender, mixed race was a nice change of pace.
Yeah, it was, and I like that a lot about it because it's something that we need. You kind of get tired of seeing the same thing written over and over and over again. You want to have something new, something fresh, but you don't want to force it. You want it to come off as being effortlessly done, and I think she did a good job with that. What did you think about? So I didn't see this as a horror. She tried to write it as a horror, especially at the end. I can see people saying going into it as a horror or a thriller, but when you get to the ending of it, it kind of changes what you probably think. At least it changed for me, but I didn't see it as a horror.
Well, I didn't like I said, I didn't finish it, so I didn't quite get to the end where you have the epiphany moment of, oh, it's not a horror. Um, I what I read, I saw it as a horror, but not like how, say, Guillermo del Toro does horror, where you walk in and you're scared pantsless the entire time. I basically read it as what's it called? I basically how I read it was this is somebody trying to write horror, but trying too hard to write horror.
Yeah.
Like, it just felt very, very, very over the top in the amount of effort that was put into making it scary.
Yeah, and I like her previous books, well, the ones that I read, because I think she has another duology or trilogy out, and I haven't read that. But she wrote, it was a romance, a YA paranormal romance, because it's about remnants, and it's like some authors have that specialty, and I feel like this wasn't really it. And I looked at it more as a thriller, I guess, or maybe because it's YA, and I haven't been reading a lot of YAs. I've been reading more, adult thrillers and horror. So I guess it's different audiences, and that's what she's writing it for, obviously, because it's YA.
I will say this, it's funny that you mentioned that you read it as a thriller, because when you go to the Goodread page for this book, under genres, it's listed as science fiction. I buy that. Especially with the it's science fiction and fantasy, and I totally buy those individually as well as a couple, because I mean, like we said at the beginning, it's very much a Matrix type of feel. I just miss Lawrence Fishburne. I really needed him in this book. Um, it's listed as young adult, again, totally buyable, and it's listed as horror. Those are the four genres. It's not listed as thriller anywhere, and so yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying about it being feeling more thriller, but I just find it to be an interesting contrast between how you read it and how it gets labeled on, like the official
Yeah,
reader's site.
yeah, because at the end, we find out that one of the characters is actually a sociopath, and yeah, it's
And
like
now
that.
we're in Sherlock territory.
Yeah, and so it keeps you. It does have a bit of suspense in it, and it keeps you to a point trying to figure out, okay, like what's going on, how they're gonna get out of here, this other stuff, and she writes it well to the point where you're gonna have to get the other book because it does end on a big cliffhanger, and so because I don't think the teens ever got out, so yeah, the way it's written, she wrote it to where you would the plot twist to where you would need to have that second book to figure out what's going on. But however, it's a lot going on, so it's a duology. I'm not sure how much you can stuff into that one book because of the way the book one set up for book two. So it's a lot going on.
And again, like with every show, we'll probably, I'm actually started now that we mentioned Sherlock and Sherlock and Matrix. I've already started typing up my side of like the list that we always end up doing anymore. But we will get you guys a list of things that we thought did something similar well. Like we mentioned, somebody being a sociopath, and my first response is Sherlock. Sherlock's a very good treatment of somebody who has sociopathy. Um, Granted, not many sociopaths end up like Sherlock, who's a high functioning sociopath, according to the BBC show. But I mean, it's a good treatment of that, I think, of how somebody like that would work. Like, and we've mentioned that people in here have trauma in their background for whatever reason. Elementary, again, a Sherlock show is a good viewing of how you get help for that and how you deal with trauma and drug use and overcoming that. Like, this is one of those things where we read this book because neither of us had read it. Erica had experience with this author and had high hopes, but we read it, because we wanted to have a scary book for October, and we both were looking forward to it, and we both just came out so mad. And there were so many better things we could have watched or read that cover very similar topics.
Yeah, it's a lot because right now I'm reading Dracula and Frankenstein. Those are horrors. Like, but it's different. The writing is totally different, so I can't even really compare.
Totally different, but it's a good treatment of the horror genre.
So yeah, that's what I'm reading right now. But it's like I did have high expectations for this author because, like I said, I read it before, but it was a very long time ago. It's kind of like you going back and rereading your favorite books from way back when, and then you're realizing, why did I like this? And I feel like if I go back now and reread those books, I will probably feel the same way like I feel now about this one.
And it's funny that you mentioned reading Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Frankenstein, because I actually yesterday went to a book club where we discussed a graphic novel version of Interview with the Vampire. And it was actually really well done. We own copies at our library. If you guys want a good graphic novel horror book, Interview with the Vampire, Claudia's Story. It's adapted from the original Interview with the Vampire, and all the art is done by Ashley Marie Witter. She did the art and the adaptation, and it's all from Claudia's point of view. And yeah, you get vampires, and it's a little scary, but the real terror is kind of just this treatment of innocence and this loss of innocence and a toxic relationship. So the whole, you get these vampires that are just awful human beings, but it was very well done. And I now want to read the original Interview with the Vampire, but I also am looking for stuff to like share with the group. Yesterday, I came across a graphic novel version of uh, Dracula, and while the art did nothing for me, I mean, I like the art. The art was great, but while the art and the story did nothing for me in graphic novel form, it actually illustrated a lot of stuff that I had trouble visualizing from the story. I mean, granted, the story works better as Bram Stoker's original, but I mean, it was interesting to read that different take.
Yeah, and it's like with me, I love Edgar Allan Poe, and I have talked about him a lot on my channel, especially a Telltale Heart. I read it, and then also I read the graphic novel of it, and it was really good. But that when I think of horror, to me, those are like horrors, his works, because it's not, especially like with Telltale Heart, even though it's like more of a psychological thriller or horror, it's just the writing style of it. Even though it's classic, you can't really compare classic to like now or the writing how it is now because it's two totally different writing styles. But it's a good outline of a horror or a thriller.
Well, and friends of mine who I personally have gotten into, I'm into classic horror, Poe, Shelley, Bram Stoker. Um, and part of the reason I've started doing this buddy read stuff with the person who's into horror is to get more into modern horror. One of the books that I read a while back was a Dracula book that it was written by Bram Stoker's great grandson. I mean, and it was well done. So,
Yeah, it's just that this one, not to me, it wasn't really a horror. I just saw it more as like um thriller. But the overall, thing of it, like with the characters and the nightmares and whatnot, it was okay. It's just that the way she handled the treatment of the kids and the mental aspect of it, I didn't particularly like that part. And like I said, with the kids in the nightmare state, they kept it was repetitive a lot. So that took out some ratings for me as well because it was all the same basically. They were all in living their nightmares and trying to get out and figure out ways to get out. I think the only thing about this story is that you can really, kind of get with. It's just a writing, and I said it with a lot of them, and maybe because um just reading one dimensional character books. I don't know. Maybe that's the thing because I thought these characters were very one dimensional.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was hard not to leave this book mad, angry, just mad and angry at the whole thing because, I mean, it was just a bad treatment of something that needed to be discussed in a better way, and mixed with having read books and seen movies that do something similar and do it better.
Right. And it just goes to like it's an exception the way it's written because I was talking about I did a I think a book haul or a wrap up and we're talking about the alpha males and it's not the most it's not the healthiest of relationship but I was reading one book and it was good because of the way that it was written. Not to say that I condone it, but the way it was written, like, oh, okay, I can see this. I can understand why this is like this. You just have to know how to write it. And that what I think was lacking in this story was the writing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a head full of ghosts. Like I said, I read that earlier in the month, actually, right before coming to the book that we're discussing tonight. And that's one of those where you kind of expect to be afraid of the girl that's mentally ill in this kind of thing. And on some level, you are because she very clearly has, like I said, multiple personality or schizophrenia. So you don't know how she's going to react in the situations. And that within itself is terrifying. But for most of the book, like at least how I read it, like most of the book, I wasn't terrified of her. I felt bad for her and I was scared for her because, they bring in the priest to do the holy water on her, and they're trying to get the demon out, and really and they try to take her to the therapist, but she doesn't take the therapist seriously. It's like this entire series of events to go wrong in order, to get her to this spot. But like you said, the writing was better, and it's basically the person kind of ended up walking the fine line between, are you scared of this or scared for it or just sad? Like, it's with that mix, it's a very tight rope of doing it right and doing it wrong. And Paul Tremblay happened to, whether I liked Head Full of Ghosts or not, Paul Tremblay did it well. He did it better than Dreamfall.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get that. That does sound good. I'm gonna have to get
I believe the group ordered it through Interlibrary Loan, but yeah, definitely look into it.
yeah, it does sound really good. But yeah, like and the only my favorite part was just really the ending, basically. Because, like, when I read it, and like I said, I read it like way back when, and I remember reading it, and then right from a little over the halfway mark, I was kind of just, scanning and trying to take notes at the same time, too. Because I knew I didn't want to wait till the last minute again to read the book. But the ending was, I just wasn't expecting the ending with it. And I don't really think anybody expected the ending because it's written from Jamie's. No, it's not. I forgot what point of view it was in. No, it was an epilogue, and it was Jamie, and he was the one that actually told us about Fergus being a sociopath and what he did to other kids, and he hopes that the safety of the kids is in a dreamlike state kind of recognizes what's going on and whatnot. And so that's why I say it's set up good. It's actually set up really good for the second book. But that moment, that writing part right there was probably the best out of the whole story for me.
Yeah, so the question ends up being, yes, the ending was a good setup, but do you really, like, after how bad you thought the writing was in this book and how mad you were. And I don't think you were as mad about it as I was. But I mean, how mad you were about the treatment of some of the stuff in here. Do you really want to put yourself through that for another book?
No, I don't think I'm gonna read the second book.
Yeah.
I don't think I am. But if you guys liked it, you go ahead. Just
Yeah.
leave me
This
about
is
it.
not us saying don't
How
read
you
it.
like
It's us saying we're not going to read it.
it. Just let me know how you like it and what
Yeah.
goes on and whatnot. But yeah,
Mm-mm.
I'm not gonna do it. And it kind of makes I won't say skeptical to pick something else because every author has its moments, and this one was
This
just
might have been just her moment. Like this duology might just have been that moment of, well, you gave us a turd.
yeah. So I mean, I would read something else, but not this. I can
Yeah.
stick to what she did before, which
And I mean, you guys know it's a big thing. Like, inevitably, when there's a series out there, I mean, it's usually me, but inevitably, when there's a series, one of us is like, this was a fine book. We don't feel the need to read the rest of the series, though. One of us inevitably is like that for a series. Usually it's me, sometimes it's Erica. You know it's a big thing when we both were like, yeah, we're not following this up.
yeah, and I'm all for series. I love series. If I can find a banging good series, I'm gonna read it. But this one, and then it's a duology, so I don't feel like I'm really missing
You're not
anything.
missing much.
Right, and if I want to know what's going on, there's Google or Goodreads because people
Mhm.
post spoilers on Goodreads, so I can
Yeah.
I can look up and I'll find out what happens or
Yeah.
about Fergus and
I
everybody.
will say this. I like that a character is named Fergus. There are the old school Celtic names are not used nearly enough in my humble opinion. You get Fergus in this book. There's a Fergus in Brave, and that's Brave's dad, but they're in Scotland, so of course there's a Fergus. Seamus. There's a Seamus in Harry Potter, and I love that name. I'm probably gonna get a dog named that someday, or my kid, poor child. Hamish. Hamish is yeah. I would never name anything Hamish, but
Hamish in Alice in Wonderland.
what?
Hamish is in Alice in Wonderland. The guy who
Yeah,
lives there.
yeah. There's a Hamish in Alice in Wonderland. Actually, in Sherlock, one of the uh, in season 2, you find out that Dr. Watson's middle name is Hamish. It's and it's a reference he makes to Sherlock and uh, Irene Adler just midway through it, and he's like, "In case you're looking for baby names, this one." And so yeah, and then later that becomes just a running joke is these middle names because later in season 4 you find out just how much he hated that middle name. No, in season 3 you find out how much he hated that middle name. And then in and then later Sherlock is like finds out that John and Mary are having a baby, and he's like, "Oh," and he gives his full name. He goes, "You can name in case you guys are looking for a name. You can name it Sherlock. I think it's a girl. Sherlock's a girl is a girl's name." That's how my weekend was spent, guys. I was watching Sherlock. I'm sorry.
I haven't finished it. I'm still in the second series.
There are 4. It's good, and don't forget to do the Abominable Bride.
Yeah, I haven't finished it. I'm not even done watching Elementary. Like I'm not.
I'm not either. I only own four seasons out of like the 6, so I'm working my way through it. But I spent a couple weeks ago watching the 4 seasons that I have, and then I was like, I thought I was off Sherlock, and then I'm like, I feel like watching Sherlock this weekend, so I went with the British one.
Yeah, they're super long, but they're good.
Well, that's why they do only 3 episodes in a season, though, for Sherlock, because they're each essentially a movie.
Yeah.
But yes, things you could spend your time on more, appropriately than this one book.
Yeah, and this one is more because I was looking on Goodreads. This one is more of if you Um, you either love it or you hate it. It never
Yeah.
any in between or 3.5 or anything like that. It was either a solid 4.5, or a 2 or 1.
Yeah, and I gave it a 2.
Yeah, I gave it 2.5. But like I said, I
It
saw
wasn't good.
5-star ratings on this, and I think it was more of the premise because the premise sounds good. It sounds, like you suffer from insomnia. They go through this experiment. Not well, yeah, it is experiment, but they go through this procedure to try to cure it, and they get thrust into this dreamlike state that are real. If they die there, they die in real life. Because a character did die there, that she died in real life. So
Yeah.
it's a good plot for a movie. It
Yeah,
sounds
it was actually a good plot for a movie with
yeah.
Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne. They made 3 of them.
So I mean, it that the premise is good. It's just that it wasn't written.
Like I said, I just really needed Keanu and Lawrence in this, and I would have been fine.
Everybody
The
dressed in
rest,
black capes and black gloves.
with his
Thorn
black glasses that don't have the just, oh god, Lawrence Fishburne is fantastic. By the way, if you want I'm not going to say a great movie because this movie is not mine, but one that will mess with you a little bit, but it is a classic and people love it. Go watch Apocalypse Now. That movie will mess with your head, and it's got all sorts of people in it that if you're not paying attention, you won't realize in the movie. One's Harrison Ford, and I say, and it's Harrison because he looks like Harrison Ford. He looks like he stepped off the Indiana Jones set, went next door, filmed a scene, and then went back. Like it's him, and it's got Martin Sheen in it, and he looks. And I watched this movie in a film class, and it's got him in it, and the kids in my film class, we all were like, God, he looks like both of his sons, Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez. And he looks exactly like both of them in this movie, but neither of them look alike. And so it's got him in it, and it's got Marlon Brando in it, and it's got Robert Duvall in it for, again, 30 seconds. I'm pretty sure he was next door filming The Godfather and just took a couple steps left and filmed his scene. And Lawrence Fishburne is in it for like most of the movie. And it easily took half the movie before Lawrence Fishburne in this movie is this big. He's got the same long head, but you don't realize it's him because it kind of sort of looks like him, but not fully. And for half the movie, we're sitting there going, okay, okay. And then all of a sudden somebody goes, wait, is that Lawrence Fishburne? And everybody in the class goes, oh my God, yeah, that is. So he does real great in it. But yeah.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. Can you hear me?
But anywho, like we've been consistently saying, there's so much better stuff you guys could, and we've listed it, and and I've sent her my list of things, and time could be so much better spent. And as you saw here, we spent our time better. We discussed the book, and then we moved on to other things that is worth it.
Yeah, it's not particularly good when you don't have a lasting effect after a book, or you finish reading it and it doesn't stay with you. That's pretty bad. Oh, it's not, it's not good. So, Lauren is gone. I think, yeah, having a little bit of technical difficulties again. I think I have quite a few on the last one. But yeah, basically, we kind of felt a little bit of the same thing with the book. I liked it a little bit more because I finished it, but I liked it a little bit more than Lauren did, but
Not much.
not much. Not much.
And if you guys have been watching the show ever, you know that when we had Julie here, it was always an even spread. There's always somebody that hated the book, somebody that loved the book, and somebody that was in between. Usually Erica was the in between. It was Julie and I on the polar opposite ends. Without Julie, we don't have a middle anymore. Either somebody loves the book and somebody hates it. And we kind of end up mirroring the spread that you tend to see on Goodreads for some of the stuff where you either hate it or you love it. And we end up being, that divisive group. And in the two incarnations of the show that we've had, it's very rare that we've agreed on or come anywhere close to being like, no, no, no. That is a 2-star rating. 2.5 is totally solid. It's we'll sit here and say, I understand what you're saying. Here's why I disagree with you. Now it's, here are the good points, but here's every single point why we hated this book.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's, this, we had, like this year, we had a lot of, like it was a lot that you liked that I didn't, and then it was a lot that I liked that you didn't, but we were able
Yeah.
to got good points as to why, okay, I didn't like it because of this. Or
yeah, and I mean we both were able to come in with the books, whether we loved it or hated it, and said, I understand what you're saying, and I like your thoughts on that. Here's why I disagree with that.
Yep. And that's all a book discussion is. It's not to
Yeah.
attack anybody else because you don't like it, because I like it. That's what book discussion is.
Yeah. I mean, if you remember us with Julie, like Erica was very much the moderator of, what did you guys think of this? And sometimes you'd hear us go, we haven't considered that point, but now that you mention it, but I mean, you'd get me and Julie like getting heated, not like angry at each other. It's just we were so into our points, despite understanding the other person. We were so into our points that it was, no, you're right in that point, and I like it, but here's why you're wrong.
Yeah. And that's like, it was fun though. It was.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even count how many times Julie and I, like, just through the year that we were, we're doing this together, we're like, no, you're right. You're wrong, but I get it.
Yeah. But yeah, overall, if you guys, like I said, if you guys read it and then read the second one, just let me know how you like
Yeah.
it.
We're both in the buddy read group. We pay attention. We won't hate you if you love them. You're wrong, but we won't hate you.
Oh my goodness. But yeah.
Yeah.
Have I haven't picked a book yet for next month. That's my fault. Lauren already put hers in. I haven't.
I mean, granted, when she says I put mine in, 9 times out of 10 when we're coming to the, if we've decided on it, yay. And we've had a bunch this year where we've decided. If we haven't decided on it, I'd put mine in. Like, I'd already read the book, and I'm like, let's think about next month. And she's like, it's the 10th of the month. Like, I'm usually putting them in like way early because I read the book and I'm like, okay, so I'm prepared for the show. Here's what I found that I wouldn't mind reading next month that I think you might also like. This time around, she's like, Laura's already put hers up. I did it yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put my stuff in yesterday.
I read it early, and I should have had mine already because that's never happened.
Yeah.
Like, never happened, and I should have did mine early. But next month will be our last show for the year. We don't do one in December because it's so busy with the holidays and Christmas and New Year's.
And we know that people are also, some of the people that watch, I'm sure, are also in school. So you've got to do finals and whatnot, and graduations and all that stuff. So it's a lot better for everybody if we just skip December.
Yep. So, but we'll keep you posted on when we have the book for next month and the date, because the people probably go out of town for Thanksgiving, so it may be an earlier show.
It might be. And again, it's going to be one of those where we would have to coordinate our schedules because I know I will be out of town, but I'm going to be out of town. It's the fourth Thursday. That's when Thanksgiving is, which is the 22nd of next month. And I'm going to be out of town the week leading up to it, but I don't know if you're out of town the week after.
No, I'll be here.
Yeah. So we will, but I mean, we're going to work it out. We'll get something figured out. The good news is the last Tuesday of the month happens to fall after the Thanksgiving. So it might be that, it might not, depending on what work looks like and all of that.
Yep. Well, I'll let you know in the buddy read. And I'm back on Twitter now. I don't know why I haven't been on there, but yeah, I've been tweeting like crazy.
You've been tweeting, you've been doing your book calls. This person, I kid you not, I have never met anybody who fills time like Erica does. She does videos, she does like the symphony choir, she writes for like the school library journal. Like I'm like, I'm lucky to wake up in the morning and get to work.
I'm gonna stay busy, but it's all fun. I'm doing everything that I love to do, so it's not like
Yeah.
a chore or anything. It's what I like to do. And actually, I'm getting ready to prep. Well, I'm getting ready to do NaNoWriMo. So attempted it last year, but I don't feel like I was mentally ready for it. This year, I'm ready. I got my outline and everything, so I'm just ready to start
Yeah, and that's
writing.
gonna be another thing that that we have to be aware of. And I've joined officially. I'm kind of sort of joining yet another book club. There's a horror book club at the main branch, and Erica does all this stuff that's rating stuff, and where she does it and is going over everything. Where I'm reading everything. So I've joined that, and there's another, and one of my coworkers is starting an African American lit book club, so I'm reading a little bit of that stuff too, just to kind of diversify a bit. So we're finding passion stuff.
Yep, and it's all good. And because I haven't really active on YouTube with other videos outside of this, so
Hmm.
I love it. It's a good thing to get out of my comfort zone with it because I'm trying to actually transition from my blog to YouTube because that's more where traffic is going now than online blogs. So yeah, but it's fun.
See, and this is why Erica's the technical one, where I'm not. She's like, I'm doing this, this, and this, and I'm like, I turned on my computer.
We have to teach you. It's not hard. Everything I know, I taught myself. It's just trial and error. Just
Yeah, I mean, it's in terms of like technology, that's not how my mind works, unfortunately. But I mean, I'm not. But that said, where her mind works technologically, mine goes, what can I find out about all of this stuff?
mm, the researcher.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much all I have
Mm-hmm.
on the book. I'm pretty sure Lauren agrees.
Yeah. This wasn't a good one, guys. We spent just as much time talking about everything else.
Yeah. So again, well, I'll let you know. I'm gonna probably tomorrow because I have a couple of books that I want to throw out for next month, and we'll also give you all the dates as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that's all I have. If you don't want to add anything, and just close it out.
Mm-hmm. I'm good. We will, like she said, as soon as we know anything, hopefully it's tomorrow. We usually try to get it for at least the day after, but no promises. It's gonna be one of those things where it depends on everything else that's going on with the day.
So yeah, I hope you all have a great, fun, and safe Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have fun. I'm gonna eat a bunch of candy and watch my favorite.
You're gonna steal it from the baby, aren't you?
I sure am. She can't do anything but watch. So
Just start crying. What are you doing to the baby? Nothing. She's a baby. She just cries. That's what they do.
so yeah. So that's all. And like I said, be safe but have fun too.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see you all next month.
See you guys next month.
Bye.